Welcome, everybody. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Spirit Matters. Welcome back. I'm welcoming you back, but it's me that's been gone for a little while. So thank you for welcoming me back. I'm glad to be here with you. We've had a little bit of a break the past week or so. I think over a week we've been on a break. I've been traveling a little bit, but I'm glad to be back. I love to travel. I like to travel. And I'm realizing the more that I travel, I don't like being out of New York more and more. I don't know if that's a symptom of something, but I'm realizing I don't like to be away. Not that just New York, I wouldn't say New York specifically, but the Bhakti Center specifically. This is your daily spiritual check-in from your friends here at the Bhakti Center. And although Bhakti Center isn't just a six-story building on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, it is a global community of spiritualists from all over the world. We've got Kimberly down in Florida and Raga Bhakti over there in Texas and other people. I'm not going to just name the location of all of our listeners. We have a live Zoom studio audience that tunes in. And the likelihood, I bet you probably aren't in New York City. If you're listening to this right now, you might be, but we have people all over the world. And so we love our Bhakti Center community. But we also have a physical brick and mortar center on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And I'm realizing that I don't like being away as much anymore. And because I just like being here with our community and our programs and our community and um, just trying to build a little fire of devotion here in the Lower East Side of New York. And this morning I was given a class before even this podcast, and talking about the ways in which we need to support each other. That life is never easy. You don't need me to tell you that. And we need each other to support each other along the way. There's a beautiful reference that's given often in devotional circles, particularly as a reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, of the story of Draupadi in the very, very beginning, where at the end of her life and her family's life, her family, everyone's reaching the end of their life, and her family have all departed and are going on. And she's recognizing that now it's sometimes in spiritual life, we need the support of others to hold us, to lift us up. And sometimes we have to, the reference given was fly our own plane, that we can get guidance from ground control and we can look up all of the procedures and processes ahead of time. But at the end of the day, there's a sense in which each of us have to take responsibility for our own spiritual life. And not everyone's going to be around there for you all the time. Didn't mean to say that so negatively, but it's like, you're alone. That's the first time we're talking in Spirit Matters. You're alone in spiritual life. Just want to let you know that. Goodbye, I'm leaving because you're on your own. But I think balancing those two things can be hard, where sometimes we get to a space where we think it's just me against the world. Nobody can look out for me. Everyone's a fallible soldier. No one can really be there for me the way that I need. And I'm never going to depend on anybody ever again. And it's just, I have to take responsibility for my own needs, and that's that. And then the other swing of the pendulum is that I'm just become completely dependent upon others, and I forget, or I relinquish the ability to take care of myself because I just expect other people to do it for me. And if I'm struggling in spiritual life, or if I'm feeling some pain or some lack of fulfillment, it must be because somebody else didn't reciprocate or come through for me, this, that, or the other. And finding that balance where I am taking a responsibility for my spiritual life, and at the same time recognizing that I need support and care from others in order to progress and make it through some of the storms in life. And that's why we're here at Spirit Matters, to try to provide a community of people that are there for you, and you're not alone, even if you never meet. And at the same time, you showing up today is an expression of your own spiritual self-care. So good job. Congratulations. If you don't hear anything else, if you realize, I don't like this podcast anymore, I'm tuning out, changing the channel, turning the dial, even though we don't have dials anymore, figuratively. Kimberly's like, what's a dial? Don't touch that dial. And so glad you're here, and just showing up and being here is a beautiful thing. And what we do to give ourselves some spiritual foundation is we read from the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, the ancient text, the song of God, the soliloquy of the soul, and the ancient spiritual wisdom speaking through to us today. And we've been in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And we've been leaving off in this first 16, right? And a big part of the Gita and spiritual life is understanding how to. I was reading. I've been referencing this book, Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul, about the idea of what does it mean to have the yoga of action. That spiritual life is a very active process, and that the biggest question, I think, the biggest question we all face in spiritual life or not, just even outside of spiritual life, is what do I do? What's the right thing to do about the choices we make? When we think about anxiety, we think about stress, it's generally has to do with choices, right? About whether choices we have to make or choices that somebody else is making for us, and about outcomes, and about worrying about whether or not I'm doing the right thing. Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I get married? Should I leave the marriage? Should I have kids, not have kids? Should I move away? Should I take the job? Should I, whatever it might be. And there's a concern always about like, what's the right thing to do on a small scale and on a large scale. And so Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is having this confusion as well. And so much of the Gita is about laying out principles to guide us towards enlightened action, because there's never a complete formula to apply to every circumstance where this is what you do in this circumstance. It's always circumstantial, but we take the spiritual principles given and we earnestly do our best accordingly. And it's never black and white, and it's never necessarily always straightforward, and it's nuanced. And that's the situation that we're here in the Gita itself. And Krishna says in verse 16 of the 4th chapter, which is, I believe, where we left off, according to Kimberly. Even the intelligent, meaning those with knowledge, those who have studied spiritual wisdom and who know a lot about life, are bewildered in determining what is action and what is inaction. The specific words here used in Sanskrit are karma and akarma, meaning activities that bind me and further bewilder me and steepen my consciousness and illusion, and activities that are liberating, that free me, that are free. I've already used that word free. I'm trying to find another word, that are not entangling me deeper into ego consciousness and material ways of thinking. And so, which is quite interesting, because what we realize and what we've been discussing is that it's not always the activity, but it's the consciousness itself. And so a big question that we can always ask ourselves when we ask the question of what's the right thing to do, we can ask ourselves, somebody asked me this, I asked this question of some rewind. We do these podcasts live, by the way, which means there's no editing, which means that you roll with it. We roll with it, which means I stumble over my words. We reel it back, rewind. Yeah, that's it, Kimberly. You got it. And so I was recently asking this question of somebody in a circumstance in my life where I was, sometimes in my work, I'm a manager, I'm in a leadership position, and I'm always asking for updates on things. Where is that report? How is that coming along? What's the deadline for that? How far along are you on things? And sometimes that can come across as pushy, or can come across as demanding, or can create anxiety of people. When your boss calls you up and says, can I talk to you for a second? We always assume negative intent. Like, yeah, Kimberly, what would you think if your boss was like, can I call you? Can you come into my office for a minute? Like, we assume we did something wrong. There's something we're being corrected about. There's something that, we're getting in trouble for, And so oftentimes it also creates a space when we ask a question about like, how was that coming along? It's easy to interpret that as you're behind. I'm disappointed with your progress, and you're failing. And we interpret things in negative ways very easily. And so I'm learning that sometimes when I ask a question, I'm just checking in on something. It can be perceived as being pushy or demanding or just like, micromanaging in some way. And so I'm trying to be sensitive of that. And I was asking a question to somebody who helps me out and coaches me with like, I want to check in about something, and how do I know? Like, I don't want to be coming across, I don't want to be pushy, I don't want to be micromanaging, I don't want to be this, that, the other. And they're just asking a question. It was a really, really, really sweet, simple, profound. They're just asking the question, just how do you feel? Are you anxious? Are you judgy? Like, is there judgment going on? Like, is there a judgment in your mind that, is there a part of you that's thinking that they're behind? Like, why aren't they moving fast enough? Why aren't they already giving this to me? Is there a restlessness in me? And so I think that sometimes it's not always the question that we ask of other people, but it's where I'm coming from. Do a little quick body scan, do a quick little mental, emotional heart scan, and just ask myself, because sometimes like, I just asked a question. Why is that question so, triggering? When sometimes, well, the place you're coming from with that question can be felt and perceived, and it's important for me. And I think that what we're looking also in this term of karma and akarma, it's not just the action, but it's the mentality that I bring to it, the possessiveness that I bring. What is something that's entangling? It's not necessarily the action of doing something, but it's the possessiveness that I bring to the action, that the outcome belongs to me, right? And so it's not owning something that makes me materially entangled. It's being owned by that thing, by allowing myself to think that it belongs to me, right? And so much of the Gita that we learn is learning how to become detached from outcomes. And so when this verse of the Gita says, even the intelligent are bewildered in determining what action is and what inaction is, what karma and akarma is. Now I shall explain to you what action is, knowing which you shall be liberated from all misfortune. Okay. There's a purport here, but I think that we're just going to go ahead and go to the next verse. Verse 16. The intricacies of action are very hard to understand. Therefore, one should know properly what action is, karma, what forbidden action is, vikarma, and what inaction is, akarma. So 3 things are being described here. There's karma, there's vikarma, and there's akarma. I feel like it's a game show. Which one is it? Karma, vikarma, or akarma? And there's like a door and you have to walk through. Wrong. But commentary here. There's a commentary here. If one is serious about liberation from material bondage, one has to understand the distinctions between action, inaction, and unauthorized action. So those are our words again: karma, akarma, and this word vikarma, which is a very interesting word that we'll look at in a second. One has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter. I love that line. That's really beautiful. To apply ourselves to the analysis of our actions. And so spiritual life in a lot of ways is just this increasing path and process of self-awareness. We talk about self-realization. Self-realization begins with self-awareness. And self-awareness begins with a willingness to take a deeper look at ourselves, a willingness to want to be willing to let go of the ideas that we thought we had about ourselves, and to just open myself up to what's there. I saw somebody posted a picture of their natural environment around there. It was like it was a cloudy day, and they said the sun is shining, you just can't see it. I thought that was really beautiful, right? The sun is shining, you just can't see it because the clouds are there. And so similarly, for us to have an awareness to look through the clouds of our own misconception of identity and recognize that what's really there, what's the real me beneath all of that. And so one has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter. So there's self-awareness and also awareness of motivation. It's huge to really, and that goes back to the question I was asking myself when I was talking to that friend about how I'm feeling when I'm asking a question. Am I anxious? Am I restless? Am I judgy? Am I indignant? Am I coming across with superiority? You know, where is that thing you said that you were supposed to give to me, you incompetent, lesser than person? Um, you know, we don't say it like that, but how many of us, we all know what it's like to have a sense of superiority over somebody else. And so to really be able to look at like motivation and intention and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing on a really deep level, that when you can just peel off those layers, you make huge, tremendous, very quick spiritual advancement. Spiritual advancement doesn't have to be some like long process of wearing a new, getting a new wardrobe, redoing your hair, fasting all day, getting into lotus pose, advanced meditations, all kinds of different things. Like, that's not the fast track to spiritual advancement. The fast track to spiritual advancement is being willing to look under the hood and pull back the layers of my own self-awareness of identity and motivation behind what I do. Because Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita multiple times, specifically in the 9th chapter, who talks about the nature of motivation, that bhakti is the idea, it's the intention behind what we offer. And so much, even in our spiritual life, we're performing spiritual activities under a veil of material consciousness. If I'm getting frustrated somewhere in my spiritual life because things aren't going the way I thought they were, it might just be, I'm not going to diagnose you for you. I'm just laying out some things to think about. It might just be because maybe I brought in some material motivation, some mixed desire into my spiritual life. And I was expecting, along with pure love and devotion, I was expecting a little bit of recognition, a little bit of comfort, a little bit of whatever else it might be. And Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita the different types of people that approach with various mixed motivations for relief of material distress, for acquiring of material wealth. And so I'm not here to label it good, bad, or the ugly. I'm just saying you owe it to yourself. You owe it to yourself. We all owe it to ourselves to just get super, 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 super clear about what we're doing and why. Just like self-awareness is such a powerful, powerful gift to ourselves. And we all have experience. We all know people that we can look out into the world and be like, that person is so unaware. Anybody have that experience? Anybody know what it's like to look at somebody and just be like, that person is so unaware, right? It's unappealing, to say the least. And so we know what it looks like on other people, but it looks the same on us too, trust me. Okay, going on with a commentary. So one has to apply oneself to such an analysis of action, reaction, and perverted actions because it is a very difficult subject matter. To understand Krishna consciousness and action according to its modes, one has to learn one's relationship with the Supreme, i.e., one who has learned perfectly knows that every living entity is an eternal servitor of the Lord, and that consequently one has to act in Krishna consciousness. So this is the bringing God into the moment-to-moment circumstances of our life, bringing higher power, bringing higher consciousness, bringing divine guidance, bringing our inner guide into the moments of our life, and not thinking that I'm acting and doing and figuring it out on our own. Commentary continues. The entire Bhagavad Gita is directed towards this conclusion. Any other conclusions against this consciousness and its attendant actions are vikarmas or prohibited actions. To understand all this, one has to associate with authorities in Krishna consciousness and learn the secret from them. This is as good as learning from the Lord directly. Otherwise, even the most intelligent persons are bewildered. So vikarma is this idea that there are some things that can be spiritualized according to our consciousness, and there are some things that are just no good no matter how you slice it. Some things that just can't be spiritualized. They're just harmful. They're just wrong. They're degrading. They are hurtful, and things that we need to stay away from. Okay. I'm going to go into the next verse here. One who sees inaction in action and action in inaction is intelligent among people and are in the transcendental position, although engaged in all kinds of activities. I'm going to say that again with the Sanskrit to make it a little bit more easy. One who sees akarma in karma, meaning one who sees one who is able to see that although acting, you're free from reactions. Or that even when you try to abstain from reaction, I feel like this is not getting any easier here. Kimberly's like, go on to the next verse, Dahel. Go on, just go on to the next verse. You can move on. You can go on to the next verse. It's a tongue twister. It's a tongue twister. So I'm going to peel back a little bit and go back to the beginning of the 3rd chapter of the Gita, where Krishna mentions, and it's not possible to abstain from action, even from a moment. We're always doing something. The soul is always engaged, is always cognizant, even when we're sleeping. The subtle body is active. And so we're always doing something. So therefore, there's always action and engagement going on. Even if I think that I'm not physically engaging with something in my senses, I'm just sitting there doing nothing. The consciousness is always engaged. And so what Krishna is trying to explain to us here is that liberation from karma is not the choice to do nothing. Liberation from karma is the choice to do everything with an enlightened consciousness and a sense of detachment. And detachment means not that I don't care, but that I recognize that things don't belong to me. And just because things don't belong to me doesn't mean that they don't belong to nobody. It means that everything has a divine connection to higher power, and that my job isn't to just get rid of everything. My job is to reconnect everything back to source and to find divine purpose in everything that I do and everything that comes my way. So when it says one who sees inaction and action and action and inaction, means that everything I just said, I'm not going to repeat it. Because I feel like I kind of said it somewhat decently and I don't want to ruin it again. Purport, commentary. A person acting in Krishna consciousness, spiritual consciousness, God consciousness, is naturally free from the bonds of karma. Interesting. Person acting is free from the bonds of action. Why? Because the activities are all performed for Krishna, for higher purpose, for higher power, for divine source, for Bhagavan. Therefore, that person does not enjoy or suffer any of the effects of work because they don't belong to me. Consequently, they are intelligent in human society, even though they're engaged in all sorts of activities for Krishna. Akarma means without reaction to work. The impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear. Impersonalist meaning no understanding of that idea of a personal higher being through which we are all connected. So the impersonalist ceases fruitive activities out of fear. So they stop action altogether. There's no devotion, because devotion means love expressed through service for another. So if I am ceasing all my actions and just doing nothing, then I am cutting myself off from the expression of love, because love is so that the result in action may not be a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. So an impersonalist ceases fruit activities out of fear because they're worried that if I act, I'm going to stumble and veer off from my path. But the personalist, meaning that person who has a recognition of the personal nature of the absolute truth, knows rightly their position as the eternal servitor of the supreme personality of Godhead. Therefore, that person engages themselves in the activities of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, I realize that it's not about abstaining from work, but it's about engaging in work in a mood of devotion. Because, continuing to read, everything is done for Krishna. Because everything is done for Krishna, that person enjoys only transcendental happiness in the discharge of their service. Those who are engaged in this process are known to be without desire for personal sense gratification. The sense of eternal servitorship to Krishna makes one immune to all sorts of reactionary elements of work. Spiritualists are not free from desires. We just simply refine our desires in a way that they're not directed towards serving myself, but towards serving something higher, something more and greater and beyond myself. And that's how we align in spiritual life. It's not because we all look the same. It's not because we all watch the same shows or like the same music or have the same hair, like the same foods or come from the same neighborhood or have the same cultural familiarities and all of those things. No, it's because we're all trying to serve a common higher purpose. We're all taking ourselves out of the center. Material life sucks. Why? Because we're all trying to serve ourselves. Or we're trying to serve extensions of ourselves. My family, my friends, my country, my job, my sports team, you know? And so they're just extensions of my false ego. Radha Swami said something beautiful really recently because his father just passed away in the past week. And he was talking about how when he was a young man and he became a sannyasi, which was a renunciate. And he said that a sannyasi is somebody that, our renunciate, a swami, is somebody that forgoes traditional family life in order to make the entire world their family. I thought that was really sweet. Because normally we think renunciation, like there is no family and nobody matters and I'm just renounced from everybody. And he was like, no, you forgo a traditional family life in order to embrace the whole world being your family. High order, very, very tall order. And so this idea that a one spiritual family is not like, I think I love my family. I love my country. I love my sports team. I love my colleagues. I love my community, my neighborhood. Well, why not every community? Every country, every member of every family. Granted, of course, it's natural to have affection for the people close to us in our lives, but it doesn't have to stop there in terms of at least extending love and respect and care and compassion. And so material life very much is putting ourselves in the center. And conflict arises simply because there is a contrast of what's in the center. Spiritual life, unity and diversity arises when we're able to take ourselves out of the center and place a common center that we can align ourselves around. And so that's the name of the game. That's what we're here for. That's what we're trying to do. And I love you guys for it. And we're going to wrap it up there. We're going to pause. We're going to stop. We're going to turn it over to Kimberly for our wrap it ups today. What are our takeaways today, Kimberly?
Thanks, Saya. We're taking away that we need both support from others and personal responsibility. It's less about the action and more about the mentality and consciousness. The fast track to spiritual advancement is to get clear about our motivations. Our soul is by nature active. The sun is shining even when we can't see it, and to engage in service towards a common higher purpose.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you so much. That's what I'm walking away with. Like, how can I take myself out of the center? I was just listening also to this. Somebody sent me this little 3-part series on forgiveness and talking about how generally when there's pain or hurt in a relationship or something, it's very rarely ever one-sided. And there was this example that they were giving from the Srimad Bhagavatam about how some transgression that took place and how everybody took responsibility in their area. And I was just thinking about it for myself, just in my own transgressions and my own challenges, interpersonal, interlife, about just like, how is this an opportunity for me to take myself out of the center? Like, how is keeping myself in the center hurting me and other people right now? And taking myself out of the center means I become willing to apologize. I become willing to see my part in something. I'm not too proud to admit when I did something wrong, because as long as I'm in the center, admitting that I'm wrong feels like it's a death. It feels it's terrifying. But if I can remove myself from the center, then I can lay down the layers of the ego more easily, because it's not about me. I just need to apologize for what I did wrong. And even if I didn't do anything wrong, apologizing is going to hurt me anyways. And allow myself to experience a little peace and freedom from that, because, like I said, it's just really not about me. I'm not in the center. I don't need to be in the center, and I don't want to be in the center, and I'm not going to be happy in the center. So how can I pull myself out of the center so that I can start to embrace higher principles of forgiveness, tolerance, appreciation, compassion, love, etc. Love you guys. Love you all tons. Really, really glad you're here. We're back on track this week. So we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Take care, everybody, and bye-bye.